I was born into a wealthy family in the capital, a young master by birthright. Because I had to undergo the strict education of an heir, I was sent to live in my grandfather's old estate from an early age, separated from my parents and my two sisters. But one day when I returned home, I suddenly found a boy about my age living there. My parents, my sisters, and even my fiancée doted on him, giving him all their affection and warmth, while toward me they showed nothing but disgust and wary, hostile eyes. Maybe it was because I had been away from home for too long that they had forgotten my true nature. Blood ties can be the strongest bond, but they can also be the most troublesome. Since these family members kept calling me cruel and cold-blooded, then naturally I would give them exactly what they wanted. "Michael, do you even know what you're saying?" my oldest sister, Emily, shouted at me. I sat calmly on the sofa, sipping the hot tea the butler had just prepared, watching the four people before me, my parents and my two sisters, argue in anger. Standing behind them was a trembling boy, looking so frail and helpless that he couldn't take care of himself. Today was my long-awaited return to the family villa. Ever since childhood, because of my exceptional talents, I had been taken to live in my grandfather's estate to receive the training of an heir from both him and the family patriarch. I usually only came back to the villa for holidays like New Year's or Thanksgiving. The rest of the time was spent at the estate. If I were an ordinary person, I might have felt lonely without my parents around. But I never did. My days were consumed by lessons and schoolwork. By the time I was 16, my grandfather had already thrown me into the company for an internship. I had no time to even think about missing them. This year's New Year was spent at the estate, so it had already been a full year since I last stepped into the villa. But when I walked in today, I saw a stranger being surrounded and comforted by my parents and sisters. They said his name was Eric, an adopted son they had taken in a year ago. If I hadn't returned today, I wouldn't even have known that I suddenly had a new younger brother, out of nowhere. From their conversation, I gathered that Eric had heard about my return, and it made him feel insecure, afraid I would drive him away. The scene looked exactly like four adults coaxing a giant preschooler. It was almost unbearable to watch. So I asked my parents outright, "Is he your illegitimate child?" The four of them exploded like gas tanks set on fire. Emily, my older sister, pointed furiously at me. "Michael, do you even know what you're saying? Didn't we just tell you? Eric is our adopted son. How could you say something so outrageous to Mom and Dad? Eric never even calls me that intimately." My second sister, Rachel, was just as angry. "That's right, you just got back, and already you're saying such horrible things. You're nothing like Eric, he's so considerate." My mother burst into tears, leaning into my father's arms. "Michael, Eric saved your father's life a year ago. Seeing that he lost his parents so young and had no one to rely on, we took him in as our son." My father glared at me with disgust. "You ungrateful brat, do you know that during the whole year you were gone, Eric has been the one taking care of us in your place? And now you dare to slander us and him like this?" Finally, Eric, standing behind them, spoke softly. "Mom, Dad, sisters, don't talk to Michael like that. He finally came home. If you scold him, it will hurt his feelings." What kind of act was this? "Michael, brother Michael, you're a grown man, and that's how you talk." Because I had followed my grandfather to countless banquets, I'd often seen women talk this way. I never imagined I'd hear it from a man. Yet my family was completely taken in. When Eric pretended to be sad, they all rushed to comfort him again. Meanwhile, I simply watched the scene in silence, took another slow sip of hot tea, and set my cup back on the table. I only questioned whether he was your illegitimate son because I saw you treating an adopted child better than your own flesh and blood. That's not illogical, is it? Since I got back, not one of you, my own father or either of my sisters, has asked how I've been. Instead, all your concern is about whether this adopted son feels hurt by my presence. It's beyond comprehension. My father, furious, pointed at me with eyes filled not with a father's anger, but with sheer hatred. The moment I returned, my mother was still crying as she explained, "Michael, all these years you've been living with your grandfather. Now that Eric is here to take care of us, of course we treat him better." Emily gnashed her teeth. "Eric saved Dad's life. Don't you have a shred of gratitude?" Rachel didn't speak. but from her eyes I could clearly see the disgust aimed at me. Looking at my entire family standing against me, I couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Angry? Not really. Sad? Not at all. Honestly, I just thought the four of them were fools. Grandpa had always told me not to come home unless it was absolutely necessary. At first, I didn't understand why. Now I did. It was because the four of them were nothing but idiots. So I asked coolly, "So what you're saying is, this Mr. Eric was the one who saved Dad, right?" The moment I said it, my father jumped up in agitation. "Eric is already part of the family. If you dare call in Mr. Eric again, you and I are done." Emily shouted furiously. "Of course Eric saved Dad. And instead of being grateful, you slander him out of jealousy, don't you?" Rachel looked like she wanted to speak, but I raised a hand to stop her. "I get it." I crooked my finger, and immediately a middle-aged man in a suit stepped to my side and bowed respectfully. "Young master, what are your orders?" It was Uncle David, the butler from my grandfather's estate. He usually handled my daily life, and today he had accompanied me back to the villa. In a cold voice, I said, "Uncle David, investigate Eric's background thoroughly, and reopen the investigation into my father's accident a year ago. I want to know why Eric just happened to appear there at that exact moment." To be honest, I had heard reports about the accident a year ago and even called home to ask. But my mother and sisters all told me it wasn't serious and that I didn't need to worry, so I hadn't followed up. Yet today I returned only to find a new adopted son suddenly in the family. That was far too suspicious. My father's face twisted in rage as he rushed forward. "You ungrateful brat. How dare you investigate Eric?" Just like before, whenever something didn't go his way, he would explode in anger. I replied evenly, "Of course I'll investigate. Didn't you check his background when you decided to adopt him? A stranger with no clear origins just happened to save you during a car accident. For all I know, he could be a spy sent by our enemies, using this chance to get close to you and destroy the Carter family from within." Eric took 2 frightened steps back, his face full of pitiful grievance. "Michael, how could you think of me that way? I only wanted to save Dad. I had no other intentions." "Michael, you beast." Emily, unable to hold back any longer after seeing Eric's tears, rushed at me with her hand raised. But I didn't flinch. Just as she swung her arm toward me, my palm shot out instead. Smack! The sharp crack of my slap echoed across the living room. All 5 of them froze in shock. I simply shook my hand, while Uncle David quickly handed me a clean handkerchief to wipe my palm. Emily's face was thicker-skinned than I expected. My hand stung from the impact. Once she recovered, she shrieked hysterically, "You hit me! Michael, how dare you lay a hand on your sister?" Her screaming grated on my ears, and I rubbed them with a frown. "Even if I didn't want to lift a hand, you shoved yourself in my face. How could I let anyone think I'm easy to bully?" I turned with a smile to Eric. His face immediately went pale, and he shrank behind my mother and Rachel. You monster!" My father pointed at me, trembling with rage and disbelief. "How dare you strike your own sister? Do you not respect me at all?" I answered flatly. "That's a question I should be asking you. Without my knowledge, you suddenly adopted a stranger into the family. Aren't you the ones who don't respect me?" I closed my eyes slightly. I stared at my family with cold indifference. "Michael, you?" My father tried to speak, but I cut him off immediately, because he had no talent for business. Ever since Grandpa chose me as the heir, he had always harbored resentment toward me. In the past, I thought we were family, and if giving him a little dignity as a father could keep the peace, I was willing to oblige. But now they had hidden from me the fact that they adopted Eric, and they even seemed to want him to step over me. I wasn't going to be so accommodating anymore. I picked up my teacup again and took a slow sip. "Let me get straight to the point. I don't like Eric's pretentious, delicate act, and I don't approve of you adopting him. So what? You're planning to go against me?" "What did you just say?" All 4 of them looked at me in shock. They had never heard me speak to them with such cold and merciless tone before. In the past, I rarely came home. If possible, I never wanted to quarrel with my family. But now, with them taking in some stranger as an adopted son and painting me, the rightful heir, as the villain, I would show them what a real villain looked like. "You ungrateful brat," my father shouted furiously. "Eric is my son now. What right do you have to disapprove? If you don't like it, get out. My mother was still weeping. Michael, I know you can't accept it yet, but Eric truly has a good heart. Please, I just want you two to get along peacefully. Emily glared at me, her teeth clenched. Michael, no matter what you think, Eric is my brother now. Even if you don't approve, you can't change that. Rachel sneered coldly. That's right. Honestly, I dislike your arrogant attitude even more. Why don't you just stay at Grandpa's place forever? Coming back only to ruin everyone's mood. What's the point? Fine, I said with a soft laugh. It seems we have nothing more to say to each other. What a shame. I know what needs to be done. I raised my hand again, and Uncle David immediately stepped forward. Young master? Call the men, I said, pointing at the 5 of them with my index finger. My eyes were ice cold. Throw every last one of them out of my house. Yes, young master. Uncle David moved with efficiency. Before anyone could react, 7 or 8 tall men in black suits rushed into the villa. As the heir of a prestigious family, my safety was paramount. These men were the bodyguards Uncle David had carefully selected for me. Normally, I kept them stationed outside so as not to frighten the family. But now, there was no need for such consideration. Michael, what are you doing? I'm not dead yet, my father roared, his pride under threat as he tried to lunge at me. But my bodyguards were highly skilled. In an instant, they had him pinned to the ground with his arms twisted behind his back. My mother and sisters screamed in fright. I spoke calmly. Since you're all so loving toward each other, I, with my kind heart, won't stand in the way. Get out. You dare throw me out of here? My father's voice was filled with disbelief. I sneered. Did you forget this villa was a gift from Grandpa to me? Since you've chosen this adopted son over me, then kindly roll out of my house. It seemed they had lived here so long, they had forgotten the actual owner was me. All these years, Grandpa only let them stay here because of me. But now that they had chosen to stand against me for Eric's sake, they could leave and continue their hostility elsewhere. Michael, you really are as vicious as we thought. Emily struggled, but a bodyguard had already restrained her. I arched an eyebrow at her. So you admit it, but you're right. Since none of you were chosen as the heir, what I say is final. I had deliberately stepped on the biggest sore spot for both my father and Emily. Their faces went red with fury. They had always been confident in their own abilities, believing I was unworthy to be the heir of the Carter family. In the past, I might have felt some pity for them, but after seeing the ridiculous choices they had made, I could only think that Grandpa's judgment had been sharp after all. You beast, Michael. Rachel tried to charge at me, but another bodyguard blocked her way. She still kept screaming. You're just jealous of Eric, aren't you? You're so vicious. I'll never acknowledge you as my brother. Emily spat the words at me. I sneered and shook my head. Don't worry, seeing the wisdom you display, I don't want to acknowledge you as my sister either. What did you just say? Emily's voice cracked with rage. Suddenly, Eric dropped to his knees, his expression pitiful as he said, Michael, please don't treat Mom, Dad, and my sisters this way. It's all my fault. If you really want, then throw me out. I'll leave. His voice was full of false misery, and my mother immediately rushed to cradle him in her arms, crying, Michael, how can you be so heartless? Eric has no one else to depend on. How can you treat him like this? Enough, enough. I raised my hand to cut off their performance. Rest assured, I'm not a devil. I won't stop you all from being together. That's why I'll make it simple. I'll just throw all 5 of you out. At my words, my mother's tears poured like a broken faucet. Michael, how can you be so cruel? I had to admit, after all these years, her tears still flowed endlessly. When I was a child, I used to soften at her crying, but now, grown up, I just felt irritated at the endless sobbing. Enough. Get out. Go and play house somewhere else. I waved my hand lightly. My bodyguards immediately carried out my order and dragged all 5 of them outside. Michael, you beast. You ungrateful brat. My father roared in fury, while my mother's cries and my sister's shrieks filled the air. I only replied flatly, can't be helped. You're not the heirs of the Carter family. With a loud bang, the door slammed shut after they were thrown out, and the villa fell into silence. I stretched lazily on the sofa, leaned back, and my expression quickly turned cold again. Uncle David, I said, cut their allowance down to 30%. By family rules, everyone besides me, the heir, received a generous sum every month. With that money, who needed to work? Except for Emily, who at least had the ambition to serve as an executive in the company, the rest, including my father, spent their days idling about. No wonder they stirred up such nonsense. They had too much free time and too much money. Yes, young master, Uncle David nodded. Then, after hesitating, he added, "But sir, they're still family." I smiled faintly, taking a sip of tea. "You're right. We are family. That's exactly why it's strange. Even though I've lived at the estate most of my life and haven't been close to them, things never escalated to this level before. And yet now, just because of one so-called savior, they suddenly turn against me. Very strange indeed." I thought for a moment, then said coldly, "They'll definitely make a move soon. Assign people to keep watch on them, especially Eric." After driving my parents and sisters out of the villa, I returned to the estate. Before leaving, I made sure the servants changed the locks and ordered that none of those 5 were ever to be let in again. The staff here all drew their salaries from me. In the past, they only treated my parents and sisters with respect because of me. Now that I had spoken directly, if they didn't want to lose their jobs, they had no choice but to obey. That very night, the men I had sent out reported back. Although they had been thrown out, they still had some savings and had checked into a luxury hotel for the time being, planning to look for an apartment in the city later. From living in a villa with servants to suddenly having to rent their own place, none of them abandoned Eric. That did surprise me a little. But it didn't matter. Once their money started running out, their true colors would show. The next morning, after finishing breakfast, I headed to the university for class. Normally, I spent most of my time at the company, but Grandpa always reminded me not to neglect my studies. So whenever I had classes scheduled, I came back to attend them. I had barely opened my book when a familiar voice shouted from afar, "Michael Carter, get out here right now." I set the book down and slowly turned my head, only to see a beautiful young woman glaring at me with a fierce expression. She was my fiancée, Lily Evans. "Michael, I already heard you kicked your parents and Eric out of the villa. How could you be so cruel?" she scolded. Just like my family, Lily didn't even pause before throwing accusations in my face. I frowned. Our engagement was a business arrangement, and we had grown up together. Lately, I had been so busy that I hadn't seen her in a while. For her to come looking for me now, if it was just to defend my parents, that was one thing. But clearly, she was also defending Eric. Had they met in private, or had my parents introduced them? Either way, she had just crossed my bottom line. "Michael, are you even listening to me?" she snapped. "You never come home. It's Eric who's been taking care of your parents in your place. Instead of being grateful, you throw them out." She slammed her hand against my desk, her voice rising. "Go bring your parents and Eric back right now." I couldn't help rubbing my ears, irritated. Strange. I wasn't hallucinating, but that's really what she said. Calmly, I asked, "Lily, let me ask you, whose fiancé are you? Why are you suddenly saying all this?" "I'm talking about you driving Eric and my future in-laws away," she shouted, her tone as if I had committed an unforgivable crime. I closed my book and gave a mocking smile. "And what position are you in to demand this of me?" Lily froze. Even she couldn't claim that, as my fiancée, she had the right to order me to welcome a stranger into my home. "Michael, I don't care about any of that," she finally shouted, as if giving up on reasoning. "Are you going to agree or not?" "Of course not." I crossed one leg over the other and sneered at her as though she were nothing more than a clown. "Why should I agree to something like that?" Lily gritted her teeth but stopped herself. I tilted my head and finished the sentence for her. "My fiancé? Is that what you were going to say? Yet here you are asking me, your rightful fiancé, to let another man live in my house, eating and drinking at my expense. That's what you mean, isn't it?" I hadn't raised my voice, but Lily's earlier shouting had already drawn the attention of the entire classroom. Now, after my words, all the students were staring at her with strange looks. Lily noticed too, and her face flushed with embarrassment. Still, she clenched her teeth and tried to argue. "You're really being petty, Michael. You were born into the Carter family and grew up with the best of everything. Eric has no parents, no one to rely on. Can't you be more tolerant?" Her words made me laugh out loud. "What are you laughing at?" she demanded. "Nothing. Just that my fiancé has such a kind heart." My smile faded and I looked at her with a blank expression. "Tell me, Lily, did you already know that Eric had been adopted by my parents?" As expected, her face immediately betrayed guilt. I crossed my arms and sneered. "So, my fiancé knew my parents had taken in another son, but you didn't say a word to me, and the moment you hear he's been kicked out, you rush here to scold me?" Embarrassed, she turned her head away, though she still tried to justify herself. "It's only because you were throwing Eric out that I got so upset." "I see." I smiled brightly and nodded. "So now you're standing here, scolding your own fiancé on behalf of another man? I get it. Since you care so much about your precious Eric, then let's break off the engagement. I won't stand in the way of you being with him." "What did you just say?" Lily stumbled back several steps as if struck by lightning. I smiled. "Didn't you hear me clearly? Since you're so devoted to Eric, I won't play the third wheel. Let's cancel the engagement. It's that simple." Lily slammed her palms on my desk again, ignoring the growing number of classmates staring at us. Her expression twisted with fury. "Michael Carter, are you kidding me? All I asked was for you to bring your parents and Eric back home. I never said anything about breaking off our engagement." Listening to her shameless words, I had nothing more to say. I simply pulled out my phone and dialed. "Grandpa, do you have a moment?" Lily's face instantly turned pale. "Here's the situation," I said lightly. "It seems my fiancé has fallen for another man, and since I'm a kind person, I don't want to play the villain who tears apart this tragic pair of lovers. So please handle canceling the engagement with the Evans family." The truth was, I didn't care who I married. My engagement to Lily had always been for the sake of strengthening the Carter family. But 2 years ago, her family's business collapsed, and because of this marriage, it was the Carter family that ended up propping them up. Now, with her heart already given to someone else, I, being so considerate, would naturally let her go. "Of course, one thing is separate from another," I continued. "Cancel the engagement, yes, but all the benefits the Carters have given the Evans family must be returned. Oh, and Grandpa, since the engagement is off, our business partnership with the Evans family should be terminated as well." "What?" Lily nearly collapsed, pointing at me with shaking fingers. "Michael, how can you cancel our family's partnership? No, I won't agree to breaking off this engagement." I let out a cold laugh and asked, "Your heart already belongs to another man. Why should I keep this marriage alliance? Do you think I'm some fool, or do you think I'm pathetic enough to accept this? I'm not. I only said those things because you're jealous and cruel, so I cut her off." "Jealous? Of what? Exactly who told you that?" "It was Eric." I had just heard her mention his name, but halfway through, she shut her mouth. So it was Eric who had been speaking ill of me behind my back, twisting her mind? But could a few words alone cause someone's attitude to change this drastically? No, it wasn't just Lily. My parents and sisters were the same way. "In any case, I'm not breaking off the engagement," Lily insisted stubbornly. But I no longer felt the need to listen. I waved my hand casually. 2 tall, broad-shouldered classmates immediately stood up and grabbed Lily by the arms. "What are you doing? Who are you?" she cried. "They're my bodyguards," I said calmly. "They're responsible for my safety on campus. Normally they pose as students and attend classes with me, and of course their presence was long ago approved by the dean." I smiled faintly. "Throw her out." "Michael, what are you doing? Let me go." Lily shrieked as she was dragged from the classroom. When she tried to come back in, the bodyguards blocked her path. The Evans family had only survived this long because of the Carter family's support. As for her betrayal, I felt little sadness. I only found it ironic that even someone who had grown up with me, who had reaped the benefits of my family, could still stab me in the back. But it didn't matter. With the engagement broken, the Carters would no longer need to pour money into the Evans family's sinking ship. Grandpa would simply arrange another marriage alliance for me. Still, Eric, in just a single year, he had taken over the hearts of my parents, my sisters, and even my fiancée. Clearly, there was more to him than his fragile and pitiful facade. That night, Uncle David handed me a folder containing Eric's personal records, along with the full report of my father's car accident from a year ago. I studied the documents carefully. There was nothing unusual in the report. On the day of the accident, my father had wanted to go fishing, so he took one of the family's luxury cars out for a drive. On the road, however, a speeding truck slammed into him. At that critical moment, Eric happened to be passing by and risked his life to pull my father out of the mangled car. "Young master," Uncle David said respectfully, "I've confirmed everything. That day, Mr. Carter was indeed saved by Eric." Even though my father was never chosen as the Carter heir, Uncle David still addressed him politely as Mr. As for Eric, he truly was born into a poor family. His parents died when he was young, and his life had been ordinary and quiet, with no connection to anyone influential. So at first glance, the possibility of him being a spy sent by our enemies could be ruled out. I nodded. "I understand. I am grateful he saved my father. But under normal circumstances, isn't the proper way to repay a savior either to give them what they need or simply hand them a sum of money? How did my parents decide to adopt him instead?" Uncle David hesitated, unable to give me a clear answer. Finally, he said softly, "Perhaps, sir, their way of thinking is a little different." I set the documents down and took a sip of hot tea. "Any updates from the men watching Eric?" "Yes." Uncle David gave his report. "Even though your parents and sisters were thrown out because of Eric, they still dote on him. Whether it's hotel stays or meals, they give him the best of everything. The four of them act as if under a spell, lavishing the finest things on Eric while pinching pennies for themselves. Since their allowance was cut down to 30%, they couldn't stay in the luxury hotel for long. They've rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment and they cook at home now. For a normal family, that's nothing unusual. But for your pampered family, it's a major downgrade in lifestyle. Your father and sisters spend their free time cursing your name, while your mother just weeps and calls you a bad son. Honestly, it's absurd." "And aside from that," I asked. Uncle David hesitated for several seconds, looking uneasy. "Young master, actually, the man we sent to watch Eric hasn't been giving full reports." "What do you mean?" Sweat beaded on Uncle David's forehead. "The man seems to be sympathizing with Eric. His tone when reporting sounded unnatural, like he was leaving parts out. After just one night of watching, he already seemed to be taking Eric's side." That stunned me. What kind of ridiculous situation was this? If my family and fiancée, after spending a year with Eric, grew fond of him, that would make sense. But for someone who only shadowed him for a single day to already be leaning toward him, that was far from normal. I tapped my knee lightly with my fingertips. "Uncle David, I'm starting to suspect Eric. Don't withdraw the first man. Instead, secretly send a second person to watch them as well." A smirk crossed my lips as I thought of a candidate. "Send Tiger. Didn't he claim he'd be loyal to me no matter what?" Half an hour later, a broad-shouldered young man with a faint scar on his face knelt before me on one knee. He was Tiger. A year ago, I had saved him from loan sharks who were hunting him down. His father had been addicted to gambling, racking up a mountain of debt before running away. The debt collectors turned on Tiger instead. After I saved him, he swore loyalty to me and had stayed under Uncle David's training ever since. In that year, his body and appearance had improved drastically. He was no longer the frail youth I had first encountered. "I have an important mission for you," I said, curling my finger. Uncle David handed him 2 photographs and a thin stack of documents. "You'll shadow the 2 people in these photos. Everything you see, hear, or sense, report it to me without leaving out a single detail. And you must not let them realize you're watching. Can you do it?" Tiger's eyes were firm. "I'll complete the mission, even if it costs me my life." Good. Now I would finally see just how deep his loyalty truly ran. Would Tiger end up falling under Eric's spell too? If he turned out to be an unfaithful dog, I would have no choice but to arrange for his humane disposal. Tiger worked faster than I expected. In just a single day, he returned with a report. "You're saying the man we first sent to watch Eric suddenly ran off?" I sat on the sofa in the old estate's living room, staring in confusion at Tiger as he knelt on one knee before me. I had already told him to stand, but he refused, so I didn't press it. "Yes, young master," Tiger said respectfully. At first, he observed Eric very carefully, but then his expression suddenly changed, and he bolted. "Then what?" I arched an eyebrow. Tiger abruptly stood, his face grim. "Young master, there's something wrong with Eric." A smile tugged at my lips. I picked up my teacup and took a slow sip. "Oh, and what's wrong with him?" Even though I was far away, it felt like he noticed me. Then a strange voice suddenly echoed in my head. The voice said I was your loyal servant, but that someday I'd die a horrible death protecting you. It was pitiful. But the strange thing is, I clearly saw him never open his mouth, yet I still heard his voice in my mind. I exchanged a glance with Uncle David, and at last we understood. No wonder my parents, my sisters, and Lily had all changed their attitudes toward me, hiding Eric's adoption and treating me as if I were some monster. So that was it. Eric had some kind of golden finger. Though I was always busy with work, I had subordinates who loved to read web novels, and during breaks, they often told me about strange plot lines. It made me wonder if Eric's ability was to let others hear his thoughts, and perhaps he could choose who to target. That would explain why Uncle David and I hadn't heard anything. I fell silent for several seconds, then said coldly, "Uncle David, dismiss the man watching Eric. Send him home. Anyone already bewitched by Eric is useless to us." Both Uncle David and Tiger widened their eyes in shock, but Uncle David never disobeyed my orders. He simply nodded. "Understood." Tiger lowered his head without speaking. I sneered. "Tiger, do you think I'm being cruel?" Tiger shook his head firmly. "Not at all. Whatever the reason, that man betrayed you by failing to carry out your orders. Simply dismissing him is already merciful." Just dismissing him? I thought to myself. Tiger had trained under Uncle David for a year, yet he was still this naive? I had Uncle David handle it because I intended for the man to be quietly put down like a sick animal. Still, Tiger's answer was good enough for me. I smiled faintly and asked, "But didn't you hear Eric say you would one day die for me? Aren't you afraid?" Anyone else might have panicked hearing a prophecy of their death. But Tiger dropped to one knee again, his gaze even more resolute. "My life was saved by you, young master. If I die protecting you, it would be my honor." "An honor, huh?" I curled my lips and waved him off. "You've done well today. Go rest." After Tiger left, I told Uncle David, "Keep training him. Have him help me at the company in the future." Eric was right about one thing. Tiger was just a stray I happened to rescue. Even if he someday died for me, I wouldn't feel much. But his loyalty was valuable. Keeping him as expendable cannon fodder seemed like a waste. Better to let him show his true worth. Uncle David understood my thoughts and smiled. "Yes, young master." Then he hesitated. "But sir, if what Tiger said is true, then your family may have fallen under Eric's influence." I cut him off coldly. If they really turned against me because of hearing Eric's so-called inner voice, then I'll have even less reason to show them mercy. In my mind, if a normal person suddenly heard someone else's thoughts, normally a person would first feel fear and doubt, then try to verify what they had heard. But I had no idea how my so-called family went about verifying anything. I knew I had never done anything to betray them. On the contrary, I had given them a privileged life and the respect of others. Yet they chose to believe a stranger who could only whisper thoughts into their minds. Blood ties can be the strongest bonds, but they can also be the most troublesome. Even if I spared them now, they would only cause me problems later. Which left me with one conclusion. The only solution was to get rid of them entirely. The first target was my eldest sister, Emily Carter. More than anyone else, she had always wanted to inherit the Carter family legacy. To prove to Grandpa that her abilities weren't inferior to mine, she had joined the Carter Group after graduating college and even secured the position of CEO. I admitted Emily was competent. I had once thought that if she worked loyally for the Carter family and brought in more profit, I might even grant her a generous shareholding, allowing her to enjoy a life of luxury in her later years. Unfortunately, when it came to emotions, Emily was a fool. After their allowance was cut, she worked tirelessly just to give Eric the best of everything. But Eric burned through money faster than she could ever earn it. Her salary was never enough to cover his spending. In her desperation, all I had to do was plant a subtle hint through my people, and Emily's judgment slipped. She ended up embezzling company funds. About half a month later, I raised the matter at a shareholders' meeting and seized the chance to strip her of her CEO position. Even though she was family, How could the directors and shareholders tolerate a CEO who siphoned company money to support an adopted brother? Without hesitation, they removed her, cutting her out of the company's power center completely. After the meeting, Emily shoved past her secretary and stormed into my office. "Michael, you did this on purpose. You want me out of the company? I'm your sister. How can you be so cold-blooded?" She screamed, her face red with fury as her hands pounded on my desk. I leaned back in my chair, unimpressed, and slid a file across the desk toward her. "My dear sister, you were CEO of Carter Group, and you dared embezzle company funds for an outsider. Are you insane?" Emily gritted her teeth. "If you hadn't cut off our allowance, I would never have done this." I laughed in her face. "So committing a crime to shower your precious adopted brother with money? That's justified? How can you be so cruel?" Emily's fists clenched, her entire body trembling with rage. "Cruel?" I mocked. "This is nothing. Don't worry, soon I'll be even more vicious. After all, isn't that what you've been calling me all along? I might as well meet your expectations." "What did you just say?" Emily froze in shock. Smirking, I picked up the phone and called the security department. Within minutes, several guards stormed into my office. I waved my hand. "Take her to HR for her final paycheck, then throw her out." "Michael, don't you dare!" Emily shouted. I smiled silently as the guards seized her by the arms. She struggled violently, her eyes filled with hatred. "Don't touch me. You really are just like Eric said. You're a demon." At those words, I couldn't help but laugh. I stood, strolled up to her, and despite the guards holding her arms, she still tried to glare at me defiantly. I grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked her head back, forcing her to look up at me. "My dear sister, that's why I say you're a true fool." Emily froze. I sneered. "Eric told you I was cruel, cold-blooded toward my own family, didn't he?" Her eyes widened in shock. "Looks like I was right," I said coldly. She wasn't wrong, really. To me, family had always been just a matter of blood ties. As long as they didn't betray me, I was willing to be generous, letting them live out the rest of their lives with food, comfort, and wealth. But they were all fools. They had already heard from Eric that I was cold-blooded, yet they couldn't resist stepping right on my landmine anyway. With my free hand, I patted Emily's cheek repeatedly, the smacks sharp and loud. "So tell me, why should I care about you anymore?" My eyes widened as I grinned at her, a dazzling smile plastered across my face. "Michael." Emily was stunned into silence. She had never seen this side of me before, cold-blooded, ruthless, unfeeling toward my own family. Now she finally saw my true nature. But I never thought there was anything wrong with it. Every month, the allowances my parents and sisters received came from money I earned. I gave them homes, respect, and more than enough wealth. And just because I didn't spend much time at home, because my relationship with them was lukewarm, they went and chose another man to call their brother. Then fine, if they wanted affection so badly, let them keep it. Just don't expect me to give them money and status on top of it. Since they already labeled me cold-blooded, I wasn't about to disappoint them. From now on, they could go earn their own living and play house with Eric. I let go of Emily's hair, signaling for the guards to drag her away. "Michael, I'm your sister. You can't do this to me." Her voice grew fainter and fainter until it finally disappeared. I returned to my seat, smirking coldly as I shut my eyes. After Emily's removal, I instructed the company to report her embezzlement to the police. If she thought I was cruel, then I would prove her right. I paid a little extra to ensure her prison sentence stuck, and I arranged for people to take care of her behind bars. My parents and Rachel tried to see me afterward, but the companies and the estate's security kept them out. From afar, I still saw the same hateful looks on their faces. That was fine. I cut off even the small allowance they still had left, let them fend for themselves. Soon, they spent the last of their savings on Eric. When that was gone, even basic living became a problem. They had no choice but to find jobs. But being spoiled for so long, with no real work experience, and no longer under the Carter name's protection, they were only suited for menial labor. Rachel, still young and with a college degree, managed to land some clerical work. But her entitled temper got her into fights with coworkers, and within a month she was fired. My once proud father ended up carrying bricks on a construction site, while my mother washed dishes in a restaurant kitchen. But they were too old and incompetent. Soon they were both fired as well. Eventually, they couldn't even afford rent. They ended up in parks, scavenging garbage just to survive. And Eric? He had long since vanished. One day, when I had some free time, I deliberately went out to see them. The moment my parents and Rachel spotted me, their expressions flipped. The hatred vanished, replaced by desperate pleading. They begged me to take them back, swore they'd never have anything to do with Eric again. I couldn't help but laugh. Weren't they the ones who said I was cold-blooded and cruel? I gave them what they asked for, so why were they begging me now? I didn't agree. I let them keep living independently. After all, in their eyes, I was cold-blooded. How could I ruin that perfect image of mine? As for Lily Evans, once our engagement was broken, she became a laughingstock among the elite. Her father, furious, came to me personally to apologize. I, of course, didn't blame him. I merely suggested he drive Lily out of the family and promised that the Evans family would be restored to its proper position. Later at the university, I saw Lily trying to approach me. My bodyguards blocked her. She desperately shouted that she would cut ties with Eric and wanted to get back together with me. But I could see her clothes were filthy, her hair unkempt, her whole body reeking as if she hadn't bathed in days. And yet what pained me most was not her appearance, but her attitude. Wasn't she the one who thought I was cruel, always rushing to defend Eric? Then how could Lily abandon him just because she'd been kicked out of her house? I stepped back in disgust and signaled for my bodyguards to throw her out. So, this was the real Lily Evans, a cold-blooded woman. For someone like that, I certainly wouldn't let her off easily. Let her experience what it meant to have nothing but true love. After being expelled from the Evans family, she had no money to continue her studies. She tried working odd jobs, but she failed at every one of them. Her mistakes got her fired again and again. In the end, she couldn't even scrape together enough for tuition and turned to loan sharks. When she couldn't pay them back, they broke her arms and legs and stormed the Evans residence, dragging her family's name into yet another scandal. Several business deals fell through, and the Evans family began to decline. When I heard the reports, I dabbed at my dry eyes with a handkerchief, pretending to shed tears. How pitiful, I sighed. But pity didn't mean mercy. Before the Evans family collapsed completely, I would keep pressing them, forcing them back to where they should have been without the Carters' support. As for Lily, abandoned by her family and crippled, penniless, she ended up a beggar on the streets. I wasn't a devil, not really. That's why I wouldn't kill my family or my ex-fiancée outright. I would let them live, living as trash collectors, scavenging together for the rest of their lives. After reviewing the Evans family's file, I stood and walked toward the door. "Uncle David," I said, "my family and ex-fiancée are dealt with. The last one left, of course, is my so-called brother." In a hidden laboratory, Eric was strapped to a chair with black restraints, surrounded by researchers in protective suits, masks, and caps. "I'm sorry. Please let me go," he cried. His voice was so annoying that I had them gag him. Ever since I discovered his ability to project his inner voice into others' minds, I had everything arranged. My men captured him, and I spread word to my parents and Rachel that Eric had fled because they ran out of money. Normally, someone like Eric should have been handed over to the government. But why would I share such a valuable prize? Instead, I built this secret lab and recruited specialists to study him. At last, they discovered it, the system inside his body. The system declared I was meant to be the protagonist of this world. As long as Eric stole my place, it promised him endless wealth and women. That was why Eric used the system's power to manipulate my family and fiancé against me, hoping to break me through emotional collapse. Too bad for him. If he had used the system's strength to build a company and fight me in business, I might have respected him. But to rely on my family and fiancé to play the sympathy card? Pathetic. The lead researcher addressed me respectfully. "Mr. Carter, we've calculated the formula. We can forcibly extract the system from Eric's brain." I nodded and smiled. "Excellent. Once it's extracted, see if you can contain it. If we can harness its power directly, the Carter family's future will shine even brighter." But the researcher hesitated. "Mr. Carter, If we force the extraction, Eric's brain may suffer irreparable damage. I glanced at Eric, writhing in pain from the drugs injected into him. My tone was flat. And what does that have to do with me? He accepted the system's mission, chose to become my enemy. He should have been prepared for the price of failure. If his brain is ruined, dump him in the ocean. He has no parents, no family. No one will question his disappearance. I gave a faint smile, waved my hand, and turned to leave. I had work to do, another deal waiting. After all, even today I remained busy as ever.